Good morning. If you're thinking of booking a holiday on the Norfolk Broads and you haven't been there before, or maybe you've been before but not recently, this video will help you with some of the points that you might not have thought about. This is my top 10 tips to help you to enjoy a great boating holiday on the Norfolk Broads. Here we go then. Top tip number 10. When's the best time of year to visit the Norfolk Broads? You can go whenever you fancy between March and October. If you're a first timer and you don't have any children, it's probably better to go when it's quieter. May and September are good months outside of the school holidays. June's busier, partly because the fishing season starts in June, and this increases the number of boats on the water and on the moorings. Top tip number 9. What's the best type of boat to hire for a first timer? I've made a separate video on this, which you can see at the link at the top, hopefully. I've also added a link in the text below. There's pros and cons of the different styles of boat, and it's really down to your personal preference. Have a quick look at the other vid, it'll give you some ideas. Top tip number 8. Big isn't always best. Unlike in some other walks of life, hiring a bigger boat isn't always the best idea. A bigger boat needs more space to moor up, so you might not always find a spot that's big enough where you want to moor up for the night. Also, the bigger boats can't go under Wroxham Bridge or Potter Heigham Bridge, so if you want to explore upstream, you need a smaller boat that will go under those bridges.
It's amazing.
If there's 4 of you, a 1-bedroom boat will be fine, as the table area will convert into a double bed. Though you might prefer a 4-berth boat with 2 bedrooms, of course. It's up to you. Top tip number 7. Your first mooring experience. Boating on the Norfolk Broads is great fun, and once you've got used to the boat, it's quite easy and very relaxing. The only bit that might cause you a bit of stress is mooring the boat. You often find that you haven't got as much space as you like. If you're starting your holiday from Wroxham, my tip for you is to cruise down to Acle Bridge for your first mooring. That'll take you about 3 hours, maybe a bit more. There's a long mooring area on both sides of the river at Acle Bridge, so you'll be able to find a big space to moor up for the night. That'll give you some confidence when you have to moor in a tighter space at some point. Mooring on the right as you go down river at Acle Bridge is not free. Somebody will come round to collect a fee. £5 or £6 for the night. Mooring on the other side is free, or it was last time we were there before COVID. There's a nice pub at Acle Bridge and a restaurant, and you can walk into the small market town of Acle along a safe path, not the main road. Top tip number 6. Aim to cruise in the morning. You'll find that mooring spots are easier to find in the morning than the afternoon. So my advice is to plan where you want to go and aim to arrive there by lunchtime. In most places, you'll be able to find somewhere to moor at that time of day. At busy places like Ramworth, you might have to wait for a boat to leave before you can moor up. In peak times in the summer, if you arrive later in the afternoon, you might have to double moor alongside another boat. Ideally, you don't want to have to do that until you're more experienced. When you pick up your boat, bear in mind that you'll be starting out in the afternoon. Again, if you start your holiday at Wroxham, Horning looks a good place to stop on your first night. Horning is a lovely place to stop, but it gets very busy, so I don't recommend that you aim to stay there on your first night. Come back to Horning later in the week, when you can moor up in the morning. Top tip number 5. It's not all about the water. Apart from cruising along the rivers, there's a lot to see and do in the area on dry land. Nature reserves, walks, cycling, country houses, a lovely steam railway, as well as all the pubs and restaurants. The coast isn't far away either, so you can go to the beach for the day. You can also visit the historic city of Norwich. So there's plenty to do and see when you're not cruising along the river. And while you are on your boat, keep your eyes open. We saw an otter playing in the river on one of our visits. Top tip number 4. Avoid Breydon water on your first trip. The Norfolk Broads are split into two parts, the south and the north. You can travel from one to the other by crossing over Breydon water at Great Yarmouth. This is a big expanse of water and the rivers are very tidal near the coast. I'd suggest that you don't plan to cross Breydon water on your first trip. I'd leave that to the more experienced boaters. But if you're feeling brave, then by all means go for it. There's plenty to keep you occupied for a week, whether you're in the south or the north of the Broads. Top tip number 3. Look out for hazards. As well as cruisers on the river, you'll meet sailboats. The oldest of these are called wherries and they're a very impressive sight. You must always give way to sailboats, some of which will be tacking up the river, going from side to side. You need to pay close attention when you meet a sailboat. Similarly, you need to pay attention when you meet a dayboat. These are small boats that are hired out for a few hours, often by stag and hen parties. You need to pay attention because they probably won't be paying attention. They're too busy enjoying themselves. Top tip number 2. Make a list. Make a list of everything that you want to ask when you hire the boat. Include anything that you aren't sure of. Things like, do you provide all of the bedding? Do you supply a life jacket for the dog? Where do I leave the keys when we hand the boat back? Do we have to leave the boat with a full tank of fuel? Everything else that you can think of. Write these questions down so that you don't forget anything. And finally, my top tip. Top tip number 1. The bow thruster. This is my top tip if you haven't been to the Norfolk Broads before, or even if you have. Make sure that you hire a boat with a bow thruster. A bow thruster, for those who don't know, is a small propeller or water jet at the front of the boat, which will help you to manoeuvre your boat when you're mooring up. This is really useful when you're mooring up in a tight space. The bow thruster basically pushes the bow of the boat sideways, so you can moor your boat much more easily. Some experienced boaters don't worry about having a bow thruster, but the large ocean-going liners all have bow thrusters. If it's good enough for the Queen Mary 2, it's good enough for us. So there we are, my top 10 tips for you if you're new to the Norfolk Broads. If you've been before, I hope you've also found some of these points interesting. You may have some tips of your own. Please add them to the comments below. Maybe we'll get enough to make another top tips video. If you found the video interesting, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. But above all, thanks for watching and have a great time on the Norfolk Broads.